Good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon session of the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of November 26, 2024. We are resuming this afternoon with item number 9, public hearing item number 9. We were earlier ahead of schedule and have already done the public meeting item that was scheduled for later in the afternoon. And with that, I will turn it over to Corey Harala to take us through the remaining afternoon agenda items.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. We'll begin with public hearing item number 9, LPC 25-00163, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 632, Lot 45, 727 Greenwich Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a residence built in 1839 and later remodeled in 1928 by Ferdinand Savignano in the Spanish colonial revival style. The application is to reconstruct and redesign the rear extension.
Hi, I'm Carrie Rothfeld. I work at Fairfax and Salmons, and I'm the project architect for this project. So this is our proposal for 727 Greenwich Street. The scope of work here, we have, we're proposing to change the windows on the primary facade, but that is under review at the staff level. And then at the interior, you'll see that we're proposing to align the floor levels from front to rear because currently they're misaligned. And this will require the relocation of several windows. And as well, we're going to remediate the stucco and the brickwork, which is having moisture penetration. Oh, I could look at it here. So here you can see the building, the existing condition on the left and the proposal on the right. On the left side of the building is facing the interior courtyard and the primary facade is on the right side of the drawing. The existing built section on the left shows how the rear of the building is misaligned from the front of the building, and the right side proposed section shows bringing the floor levels up so that they are aligned. And important to note that this is a multiple dwelling building. There's 3 units in this building. So here, a blown up section of existing and proposed showing the change in floor levels. On the second floor, we're proposing to raise the floor 1 foot 11 inches, and on the third floor, 3 foot 9 inches. And this is all proposed to stay within the existing building envelope so that the parapet, which is facing the east, remains at the same height that it currently is now. And you can see also that the guardrail that gets installed is pushed back from the east so that it's not visible from the garden. And here we have the proposed colors and materials that we'll be using. A lead coated copper roof for the bay window, with the studio green sashes for the windows, which is throughout the co-op complex. And then these are the stucco colors that are also consistent with the rest of the buildings in this co-op complex. So our building sits within the Greenwich Village Historic District, and you can see there it's on the west side of the area. It's located on Greenwich Street between Perry and Charles. And here we have the aerial view of our site, 727 in red, which is facing an interior garden, interior courtyard, where the buildings on the north side of the garden are also part of the co-op complex that our building belongs to. And here we have the lot and block information those are the 10 buildings that belong to the Greenwich and Perry Street Housing Corporation. And 727 was actually built in 2 phases, the front portion of the building in the 1830s and the rear portion of the building, which we're focusing on, which was added on in the 1920s. Here we show the primary facade facing Greenwich Street, where this is going to stay the same other than the replacement of the windows. And these are the buildings for the whole complex on Perry Street and Greenwich Street. And a better view of the buildings on Perry Street. So currently, these are the existing conditions of the interior of the building at the rear. You can see it's pretty badly dilapidated, and this change in level is pretty hazardous and makes it a difficult condition to use and to repair. And this is the condition at the roof, the existing bulkhead, and so on the left side is the lower roof of the existing building that we would be raising up. So again, the proposed scope of work is to align the rear portion of the building's floors with the front portion of the building. Here on the north side of the building, you can see at the, how we would be infilling the parapet to the existing height of the east side. And at the bottom, that's a double blind arch that was originally a window. So we'll be replacing those windows and then adding 2 other windows on that elevation. And then the east facing facade, on the left, you see the existing configuration of the windows. And then on the right side, the new windows. On the south side, we're also keeping consistency with the rhythm of the existing windows. Let me just go back for a second to this window. I wanted to just make sure, we feel that the rhythm of the windows in the new proposal is more in keeping with the rest of the complex and all of the other buildings that you'll see in a minute. So we took inspiration from all of the buildings that are part of the co-op as well as the area around it. So this is the garden that our building faces. And these are the buildings on the north side of the garden. The color palette informed our decisions, as well as the details of the stucco. And here we see the rear of our building. This is on the left side. The arrow is pointing to the north elevation, and you can see the passage through from Greenwich Street. And then in the middle is the rear elevation, the east elevation that we are proposing to change. And on the right, the south elevation, where the rhythm of the windows is going to stay primarily the same as it is now, but raising up them to be higher with the floors. And then the details of the courtyard and the interior gardens really make this a special oasis within the city. And we feel that this is, an important respite, an important place for the community of the Greenwich and Perry residents. Here's some more details of the railings that have been restored, that we're working on restoring over time as well, and the stucco details. And then in the area, we looked at some of the other buildings that have some bay windows as precedent for how we want to propose to rearrange our windows. This building, 71 Washington Place, was built also in a similar time period, 1830s, with the bay window added on as well in 1830s. And 1930s. And then on Perry Street as well, this bay window was added on at a later date. And then just up the street on Greenwich Street, this complex was built in 1989, actually. It's a similar arrangement with a number of buildings facing an interior courtyard with these bay windows, which we feel is a very, nice precedent for the bay window in our garden, and has these interior facing big windows that really lend to this nice area of respite. So here is the rendering of our proposal with the colors and the materials that we plan to use. And here it is existing and proposed, so you can see how the new building will be very consistent and coherent with the adjacent buildings all surrounding the garden. So that's it. We hope that you can understand and appreciate that this is really, our proposal is to enhance the experience of the residents of this 10 building co-op who really use this garden as an oasis.
All right, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions on this? Okay, we'll move to public testimony. We may have questions after that. Jeremy Woodruff.
I'm Jeremy Woodruff, speaking again for the Victorian Society in New York. This group of 6 houses, of which 727 Greenwich is a part, is an important example of an early 20th century reimagining of 6 decrepit row houses into a unified complex. According to Andrew Dolkart, who discusses this particular conversion in his book, The Row House Reborn, the buildings were redesigned in a hybrid Mediterranean medieval style. A real estate advertisement noted the artistic common garden in the back reached through an archway opening onto Greenwich Street. Residents of the rear apartments entered them via this garden. This project upgraded what had been row houses occupied by over 150 laborers and other working class people into housing for just 50, mostly young single people or couples. It appears that the proposed work would retain all the remaining character-defining features of the 1928 conversion. The proposed new garden-facing facade conforms stylistically to the 1928 work and in fact enhances the charm and character of the rear garden. We suggest only that the design be modified to incorporate the small arched openings in the parapet that are typical of the complex, visible both elsewhere in the garden and on the street facades. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one remote participant, Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And once you're a panelist, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC supports this proposal, which we feel will improve the ambiance of the courtyard. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. So it's largely supportive testimony, but there was a comment about incorporating the arches, and I didn't, excuse me, I wanted to give you the opportunity to address that.
Unfortunately, in raising the floor levels and the ceilings along with it, obviously that eliminates the opportunity of keeping the arches. And we looked at various designs that would sort of have remnants of them. But this, let me go back to one of the drawings that shows the lines where you can see it. The ceiling just comes up here. You can see, I think you could see it better in a different one. Here you can see how those arches are really kind of cutting right through the middle of where the ceiling has to be raised to in order to level out the floors. We looked at other options, you know, removing the roof of the bay and changing and having blind arches, but really nothing seemed to keep them intact. And we thought that the best method would be to not keep them.
I do see that changing the floor levels would intersect or interfere with it, but you have a parapet above the bay. And did you look at, I know it would be in a different location, but did you look at raising that parapet to accommodate arches?
We were really concerned with making sure that we didn't block any more light for the adjacent buildings. So we were primarily concerned with keeping the parapet height as it was, so that we wouldn't have any more shadows cast on the other
Okay.
buildings.
Understood. Thank you. Commissioners, any other final questions? Yes, Commissioner Chu.
Just to clarify, are you rebuilding that back wall completely?
No,
No. It's
only as much as is needed to
just- so
insert the new
infilling
windows.
new lint-
Excuse me, sorry.
Infilling the existing windows and adding new lintels for the big new openings.
Correct. And there's some deteriorating brick, so that will be replaced along the way as well.
And is the color supposed to match the existing front facade color?
So the palette of buildings, there's sort of a range of colors that are in the whole palette. And so, yeah, we're keeping within that palette of stucco that's been approved for the entire co-op complex.
So not necessarily the same color as your own facade on the front.
Well, it's tricky because it changes color in the passageway. Let's see if I can find that photo. I think it's back here. Yeah, so as you come through that passageway, the passageway itself is 729 Greenwich Street, and that's one color, and then 727 is a different color, so
Got it.
it's, yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, all right. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll move to our discussion after we close the hearing. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed, and this is one of a group of row houses that were altered in the early 20th century with a more Mediterranean revival style on the front facade and a common garden in the back. And the application today is to rebuild or to re-level, to adjust the floor levels to align them, not necessarily rebuilding the whole rear facade, but opening it up to redesign it with a bay window and a color that would relate to the colors of the other rear facades within this complex. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, sure. I think that, that I'm okay with realigning the floor levels, and in general with the design of the rear, but I think that, they should retain those, little arches, which are, characteristic of a whole row of buildings. And, it's unusual to see something in the back as well as the front, but in this case, it's really quite a nice little distinction, and I think it could be included without a lot of trouble. They could still, do most of what they're doing by just not losing those from the parapet.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Chu?
I mean, I think in general, the proposal's appropriate. It's those arches that I think about as well. And the question is whether it has value to recreate them as opposed to trying to keep, because I
Yeah.
see it challenging to keep them here. And the neighboring building to the left, it also has them, and that was a really nice element that consistent on the front and the courtyard side. So this is, it's tough. I do see that as the one element that kind of ties this aesthetically together, and I would like to see an option where they try to incorporate that at the top. I think it's doable. The neighboring building's also taller.
Okay,
And I'm curious to see what the others say. I'm just about
okay.
it's not the existing fabric. That's the reason
Have some flexibility. Okay.
yeah.
Commissioner Master?
Yeah, I actually find this to be a big improvement. I think that, facing the courtyard, I think when you look up, it's much more attractive rear facade than what is existing. I think that the two-story bay window element is very attractive here, makes a lot of sense. I think the color is fine and blends in much better than what is existing now. I mean, if there's a way to incorporate the arches, I think that would be lovely. But I understand the explanation that you gave, so I can actually find this appropriate as is as well.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
I mean, if you look at page 31, you see the difference. It's really a beautifully done project. The bay windows, large in scale, but they work very well. I do think they can add the cutouts by raising the parapet up. They have a railing that you could get rid of the railing, raise it up and put it in. And they can have a cutout if they want to, whatever other decoration they want to put there, but can be done. Nice project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Thanks. I generally agree that this is more or less appropriate. I think that it does touch upon a number of issues that we've seen recently, where we have seen proposals in buildings to realign floors. I think that what differentiates this and makes it appropriate is that it's in a rear facade as opposed to something visible from the street, and it's in an addition as opposed to something that was original kind of fabric. That said, I think that everyone's passion for these little arches is something I share. I think that the applicant can look at the front facade where there's a lot of fussing with the parapet to create places for these little arches. And I also want to note that while the bay window is attractive as a design element, it doesn't appear to resonate with the rest of the building as it was renovated in the 20s. There are, as far as the pictures that I could look at quickly, I didn't see any accretions of this nature. And the windows certainly look quite a bit larger than the rest of the windows on this otherwise relatively uniform rear yard enclave. So they might explore reducing the size of the windows to make a space for the arches, and to also at the same time have their modification fit in better with the overall design of this designed rear yard, which is a rather unusual feature.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
First, I'd like to say, although not directly in our purview, I'm happy to see you're keeping the 3 apartments. I agree with my fellow commissioners about the arches of either raising the parapet or trying to lower or reduce the size of the bay a bit. And so I think working with staff that can get resolved. Besides that, I think it's a very nice project.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I also agree it's a very nice project. I think there's been a number of suggestions, and I think they should work with the staff about, the issue with arches.
Okay, all right. So I think we will do an approval with modifications. So approve the project, but that they work with the staff to incorporate the arches into the parapet. That would be great, Commissioner Chapin.
Okay, in the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 25-00163, 727 Greenwich Street, Greenwich Village Historic District. A residence built in 1839 and later remodeled in 1928 by Ferdinand Savignano in the Spanish colonial revival style. Application is to reconstruct and redesign the rear extension. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I also note that there are 11 buildings on this lot, featuring 4 back buildings and 7 early to mid-19th century street-facing houses that were all redesigned in 1928 in the Spanish colonial revival style by the same architect. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed work will not be visible from any public thoroughfare, that the rear facade is simply designed, and that below the parapet, the reconstruction of the rear facade will not damage or eliminate any significant features of the building, that the raised height of the parapet will be in keeping with the 1928 redesign of this group of buildings, which features varying parapet heights at the front and rear facades. that the introduction of a design bay at the rear facade, which faces a communal courtyard, other rear facades and back buildings with a consistent design language will enhance the facade and relate to other features like the decorative railings and parapets without substantially increasing the massing of the rear facade. That the proposed two-story bay featuring wood cladding, punched windows, paneling, and a metal-clad roof will be in keeping with historic features and later alterations sometimes found at rear facades and extensions of row houses within the historic district. The proposed off-white and beige color palette and small hipped roof of the bay will recall the historic color palette and tiled roofs found throughout this complex. And that the raising of the first and second floors will align with the floor heights of the main building, and the subsequent change and addition of windows at the rear side yard facades will maintain simple punched openings, which is typical of simply designed rear yard additions in this historic district. However, I find that the arched openings of the parapet are a unifying feature of the 1928 redesign of this group of buildings. Therefore, I recommend that the arches be retained or reintroduced in the new design, working with the staff.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
Second.
John?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
8 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
It's approved. Thank you. We'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 10, LPC 25-01525, an application for certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1202, lot 140, 17 and 19 West 88th Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. This is a building designed by Wexler and Schmenti and built in 1968 to 70 as an addition to the adjacent altered row house originally built circa 1890. The application is to legalize painting the facade and the installation of banner poles without LPC permits.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicant has entered the hearing via Zoom. Andrew, if you could unmute your line, I will give you control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen, and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Hi, my name is Andrew Dilger. I'm the architect for 17 West 88th Street in Manhattan. This is the Dwight School project. So here is the historic map. You can see where it is in Manhattan, and we also have a zoomed in picture where you can see the picture, and the number 17 is in between these two styles of buildings. We've got the typical row houses and then these two larger buildings. Here is the existing conditions as they are on in November the 5th. You can see the typical row houses on the left, and then more, I guess, industrial architecture on the right. And this building is kind of in between these two styles of architecture that you can see. Here is our drawings for the project, where we were proposing to repaint the entire building and to add these banners to the project. The banners would highlight the students' artwork to show, and it would be yearly changed up, just showing different art pieces that the students have completed. Here is a 1940s picture. You can see that it's always kind of been run down, very bland. They did actually have a flagpole in one area, which we are proposing to remove and add several other banners. This is just another photo of the 1940s within the same area. These are the brackets that we are proposing to be used. We have considered the wind factors when showing these banners. These banners will be held securely. They're not in danger of falling. And here are some pictures of the streetscape. You can really see the two different styles looking down the street in both ways. Here is a picture of a rendering that we designed, what it should look like. You can see the new color. That's where we were keeping, it's really a uplifting, going away from that almost rundown look. We are keeping the same texture for the building, just giving it a new paint job, as well as the new colorful banners that will be displayed. Here are two more different renderings looking down the street. And these are two different styles that highlight banners that, so it's a similar style of banner highlighting different artworks and logos that we found in the area. One is in Brooklyn, one is in Manhattan. So we believe that these new banners will really keep with the new style. And I think that's about it.
Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? This application, this is two row houses that were in the past combined with this modern facade pushed out in front of sort of 1.5 of them. And the sort of the theme of the day is to paint that a white color and to install these stretch banners, which would show students' artwork. All right. There are no questions. We'll go to testimony. Jeremy Woodoff. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Jefferson. Hang
Is
on,
the facade
Jeremy.
painted one color or is it two colors now?
So let's ask
Texture
the
of the paint.
applicant, is the facade sort of, is it painted two colors or is it unpainted and just we're seeing the material, the underlying material? Can you explain the existing condition?
Sure. So this picture shows it's the same color. It's just different textures of the building that we're keeping that might give it a slight different colored look.
Okay, so I mean the before the paint was applied. When the application first came in, I think that the white paint hadn't yet been applied. Is that right?
Yes.
So in the condition before you painted the facade white, yes, what is that?
So I believe we have a picture of that. Just a minute. So here's the before it was painted in kind of a brown color, light brown.
Okay, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. You applied for this work and then before it was reviewed, painted the facade white in contradiction of not having approval for that?
Correct. So the owner decided to move ahead with the project without getting approval just because of the previous work that had been done in the area. He already had scaffolding, all the equipment, it was already there. And it seemed easier to move ahead with the project and not have to wait for all this approval that might take a
Just
while.
to understand, they knew full well they were moving ahead illegally.
Yes,
It
sir.
wasn't like I didn't know I'm coming in. It was, I knew this and I still did it, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jeremy Woodoff.
My name is Jeremy Woodoff, again, speaking for the Victorian Society, New York. We're not addressing the fact that the work was done before the permit. That's obviously a problem. But our testimony is as follows. This application brings to mind Frank Lloyd Wright's comment about the architect who, seeing his mistake, advises his client to plant vines. Painting a masonry facade and installing multiple poles and banners are things we would normally testify against. But here, the reverse is true. Both the paint and the banners help to call attention away from this dreadful building. Unlike Wright, who may have been joking, we are entirely serious. We think the work that was done is not only appropriate, but beneficial to the building and streetscape. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll note there is no one else in the hearing room to speak on this item, so I will turn it over to Gregory to see if we have remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one remote participant with their hand raised, that being Megan Fitzpatrick from Landmark West. Megan Fitzpatrick, I've promoted you to panelist. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. Megan Fitzpatrick speaking on behalf of Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee opposes legalizations of work installed without LPC permits. When property owners ignore the landmarks law and make changes without Commissioners' guidance and consent, all too frequently the results are at best unremarkable and at worst destructive. We are disheartened to see that the Dwight School, an educational institution and steward of a landmark, fail to comply with regulations. As educators, they should lead by example. The already stark contrast which exists on the block created by interventions at this address in the 1960s is further exaggerated by illegally painted white facade. It is inappropriate to paint a facade of this kind, let alone without permits. Doing so shows a disregard for the streetscape and treats the building as the backdrop to students' work instead of part of the built fabric of the district. We also believe the installation of 4 banners on a residential street is excessive. It is equally disturbing to see the applicant mislead the community when presenting to the community board. They did not disclose the fact this proposal sought to correct a violation and stated falsely that the facade had not been altered yet, when in fact this was why the violation was issued. We hope to see better from applicants at the community board, and all information is forthcoming with accuracy and proper process. Our community recommends the commission reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 7 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to ask the applicant if they'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
So I just wanted to add that when we went before Community Board 7, it was given approval, and that seemed like a good sign of things to come.
Yes, okay. Commissioner Goldblum.
What kind of paint was used?
What kind of paint? I'm not sure what you're referring to.
The white stuff on the building, what's it made of?
I don't have the answer to that, actually. I believe it is your typical paint, but I'm not really sure.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Jefferson.
Question I have, the facade, the white facade, then you have this red facade in back of it. It's all part of the same facade, right? What happens to the red portion? Where the cutout is? Is that stays red, or that becomes white?
No, so that is a different building, and that will stay as is.
It's a different building?
No, it's behind your facade.
It's part of the building.
It's part of the building,
Yes.
because you see the arch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. And the upper right-hand corner.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
eventually,
So, I'm sorry, that is, part of our facade. It is not going to get painted.
Okay. And then the 8 poles represent 4 banners. Is that correct?
Correct. One at the top, one at the bottom for each banner.
Okay. All right. Any other final questions, commissioners? Okay, let's close the hearing. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion on this application to paint this non-contributing outer facade of these former row houses a white color. That work has already proceeded without permits. So the existing photographs, condition photographs represent the appearance. The applicant has shown us that the block is otherwise lined with row houses that match the original condition at this site, and to the west and then to the east, a modern school building and a light colored apartment building. So there are some light colors to the east and darker colors to the west. And then the proposal also includes the 4 stretch banners. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
I'm a bit disappointed. This is a Dwight school, and the way they apply this new facade to the existing building is collaging it in such a haphazard way.
Well, I think that happened prior to
Not
designation.
present.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
I'm not sure they were in there at that time.
I think the texture and the horizontal lines are fine. I mean, I'm confused about myself about whether you paint the textured portion one color and the flat portion a different color, or you just make it one color, the whole facade. I do think the banners, there are 3 different proportions of banners, I think there are. The smaller one and then the other 3 are the same. I think the location and placement of banners should be restudied with staff.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum.
Gerardo's a much too nice guy. You know, we often see people who do stuff and come to us to remove violations, and we often rail about that. And when that happens, I try to withhold the urge to do so. You know, people are people. Sometimes you make a mistake. Sometimes you don't know. Bureaucracy is rough. But this is so egregious. These people filed for an extensive bit of work on the neighboring building a couple of years ago. They are knowledgeable. They are an institution. This is shameful, and it's completely unacceptable that kind of behavior would take place from an institution that has been part of a landmark district pretty much for its entire history. The coding of a masonry building is a very fateful decision because it's hard to undo. And when you take a building that had a masonry color that both blended with the rest of the campus and the rest and parts of the block and change it into a graphic color that has no general relationship to that block or that campus, it seems to me completely unacceptable. So for me, the white and the black trim are not acceptable or appropriate. They don't relate either to the campus or to the block. I would recommend that they examine the material used, and if it's removable, that they remove it and that they clean the facade as opposed to painting it with something that will require ongoing maintenance. Failing that, I think the applicant would have to work with staff to find colors that were, first of all, to make sure that the material being used was appropriate to a masonry installation, and that the colors were used that could blend both with the existing streetscape, the building, the historic building that is a remnant at the top of their own building and the rest of the campus as it exists on the block. I think that the sign, the banners don't have deep precedence in a residential block of this nature. I personally think that there should be no banners, or at most one or two at the lowest level.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
So first of all, and this may be a question for Corey, are they paying a fine for having done work without authorization? Or John?
No, they are not paying a fine for this at this time.
Okay.
No.
So they
Could
have
we
the
make them pay a fine?
Yes, it is, we could issue a violation for intentional work done without a permit, which is, requires an appearance at oath and requires a fine.
So that would be the first thing. The second thing, which Commissioner Goldblum alluded to, if this is not a breathable masonry paint, it has to be stripped before you do anything else, because otherwise that facade will blow apart in a number of years as water gets stuck behind the paint, can't get out. Second of all, I think the white is the wrong color. I realize it's a non-contributing building, so I'm not against painting it necessarily, but it needs to be painted color sympathetic to the adjacent buildings and not something that sticks out. I like the banners, and given that this is a non-contributing building and a school, putting the students' artwork up as banners seems to me to be a really nice idea, and so I can support that. But I agree with Commissioner Goldblum's. I'm appalled. They knew better. This was blatant disregard for the process for no apparent reason.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Short of proposing growing vines, I'm in agreement with the comments about that. Number one, materiality that make sure it's compatible, and then number two, if the color can be work out with the staff to a more agreeable, and then I'll leave the rest of the commission to decide on the number of banners.
Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, well, I agree with the comments of previous commissioners and also with the one of the some of the testimony. It's you know, a new category of architecture, dreadful, and this certainly applies here. And you start with a building that is very undistinguished and painted a color that's inappropriate, and then say we'll put a bunch of banners on top of it like an art project. And all of that combines really to make this do what we always say, do, you know, don't call attention to yourself in a negative way in a historic district. So that's what's happening here. So we need to, it needs to be addressed by having the color be appropriate. Banners on schools, we generally have approved at least 1 or 2 banners for schools. If there was some other kind of art proposal that was like really an art proposal, perhaps I could approve that. You know, there's some kind of facade thing or something going on, I don't know. But I'm, you know, just for the students' sake, it's too bad not to have lots of banners, but it really is not appropriate to have that many banners. I can't think of a place other than something like the Met or, you know, a huge building where we've, you know, approved more than 1 or 2 banners. So I think 2 would be the maximum that would be appropriate here. And I guess that's it.
Okay. Commissioner Chu.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with my fellow commissioners. I think we're all reeling from just the awful addition that was placed on the historic building facades to begin with. And I know that that was not a responsibility of this applicant, but the approach for the painting, it feels like, excuse the term, but lipstick on a pig. It really just, it's making it stand up even more of what is egregious. And so I would agree with my fellow commissioners on if there needs to be first a test to make sure that's not normal paint, because normal paint will trap water and not allow it to breathe. And that's going to be the worst situation we could have. It's also going to be challenging to strip it off that textured stone there. That's going to be tough. So I think that immediately needs to be investigated just to understand what damage has been done to the facade. And if there is the proposal to bring back a coating of some kind, I would entertain something that was in keeping with the palette. It can be different and it should be a little different, but not completely from another universe. I think that's the reaction we're getting right now. That's it.
Commissioner Master.
I think all the other commissioners have talked about the paint color, and so I'm just going to say that I agree with them. In terms of the banners, I'm generally very supportive of banners and signage. However, I wonder if this building, the size, the scale of this building supports the 4 banners in this situation, even though it is an educational institution. So I'm going to say it doesn't. And I would say we should probably limit it to 2 banners. And perhaps we should, with the staff, study where they should be placed in terms of the spacing, to make it not overwhelm the building, which right now it does.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I think we're all in agreement, and I appreciate everybody's really thoughtful comments about how to address this. And I think that we can go ahead and make a motion to approve painting the facade contingent upon their doing some exploration of the existing coating to ensure it's breathable. And if not, remove it if possible and repaint with a breathable material that is a color that blends better with the streetscape, and that they reduce the number of banners. So let me go ahead and try to make this motion and see if we can get through this. In the matter of docket number LPC 25-01525, 17 to 19 West 88th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District, a building designed by Wexler and Schimenti and built in 1968 to 70 as an addition to the adjacent altered row house originally built circa 1890. This is an application to legalize painting the facade and the installation of banner poles without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. And I note that the buildings are highly altered, and the current facade is not one for which the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District was designated. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that painting the textured concrete masonry block facade would not damage or obscure any architectural features, and that stretch banners are a signage type often used on schools or institutional buildings, emphasizing their community presence. However, I find that the applicant must work with the staff to explore the nature of the existing coating to determine whether it is breathable, and if not, investigate its removal. And that any new proposal to paint should be a material that is natural in color and relates to the streetscape and or the adjacent school building, and that the quantity, placement, and details of the stretch banners calls attention to themselves, and recommend that they be reduced to no more than 2 at the lower level, and that this approval will come with a compliance date. And if the work is not addressed within that time period, we will move to the next enforcement action, which will require an appearance at oath and a civil penalty. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
Okay, thank you. John?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Master. 8 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
Okay. And we'll move to the next and final item.
Last item is public hearing item number 11, LPC 25-03381, An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1383, lot 51, 823 Madison Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is an apartment building originally built as 2 houses in 1880 and altered in the neo-federal style by S. Edson Gage in 1926. The application is to alter the facade, replace storefront infill, and install awnings and signage.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Erin Ruley, Higgins, Quaysbarth and Partners. We're the preservation consultants for this project at 823 Madison Avenue. I'm joined today by Antonio Rodriguez of Kenneth Park Architects. They're the local architects for the project. Sarah Ripple, my colleague at HQ, and on Zoom we have Jose Manuel Gonzalez from the design team in Spain. I'm going to take you through the presentation, and then the entire team will be available for any questions you might have. So today we're looking at 823 Madison on the left. It's located on the east side of Madison Avenue between 68th and 69th Streets. It started life as a 1880s brownstones, and in 1926 the buildings were combined and completely redesigned in the neo-federal style by S. Edson Gage. And here we have the proposal. The existing condition in the block front is on the top. The proposed condition is on the bottom. And the proposal today is to replace the existing 2-story base, which is all non-historic, with a new brick-clad base, contemporary infill, and signage. As you can see, it's a very sort of straightforward contemporary system. We'll look at it in detail. Spandrel extending across the facade between the first and second floors, and so maintaining that characteristic rhythm of the Madison Avenue storefronts along the facade. Here's a detailed view of the proposal. So the brick cladding will be, the brick will match the upper facade and will be laid up in Flemish bond, like the upper portion of the facade. The existing limestone course will remain here. There has been a really significant history of change at this base, and we'll take a look at that. But there is no historic fabric that remains. The storefront system is black anodized aluminum, very simple, clean system that acts as insertions within the brick piers. And at the second floor, it's a very interesting design. It has canted windows that extend back from the bottom point of the spandrels. And then in front of that is a architectural fins, metalwork, sort of a louvered system, and to play on the historic awnings that we see up and down Madison Avenue. It also picks up on the metalwork, which is a significant feature on the upper section of the facade. And as we go through this, the effect here is really intended to be a dynamic one. There is 2 things happening that within the design. One is a gradient of the pier and bay dimensions. So you can see the, maybe I'll go back up to this one. You see a little bit better. The proportion of the openings extends and widens as we head toward the south within each of the bays, and the piers reflect those altered dimensions as well. And then at the second story, that fin system, these are 1 inch wide, separated by 3 inches. So we have about 75% transparency at those openings. But the effect as you're walking up and down Madison Avenue is going to be one of sort of a cascading or shimmering effect. And so the idea here is to have something that has a singular identity, a unique condition where no historic fabric exists, and be able to do something that has presence and identity for the brand. This is Carolina Herrera, the CH Carolina Herrera store. This will be their new flagship space. And so everything that we're going to look at happens behind the plane of the brick. So it has distinct architectural elements, but is all kind of reserved in its approach. So long history of change. On the left is the original condition of the building. You can see it had a one-story base historically, neo-federal style. So the brick came all the way down to the sidewalk level. That first story was capped by a limestone or cast stone cornice. The storefronts were entered through the center of the building, and then the outside edges were the residential entries above. And you can see the baskets extended up each of the floors to the 5th floor. And the piers themselves were framed with limestone as well, but brick within the field of the column. At the time of designation in 1981, that condition was largely the same. And then in 1985, the commission approved a proposal to establish a 2-story base. And so at that time, the commission approved a new limestone clad base. The ground floor was storefronts. The building entries remained at the outside edges of the building. And the second story was punched openings. So these had multi-light windows. They weren't quite display windows, but more consistent with what's happening on the facade above. In the early 2000s, there were 2 approvals. The first expanded the openings on the second floor to create display windows. And then in 2007, the second floor and the first floor were connected vertically to create that sort of characteristic 2-story expression that we see up and down Madison Avenue. At that time, the entry was still at the center of the building. And then in 2013, that condition was again changed. Storefronts were expanded and a center pier was installed. So this proposal before you today would actually be the 6th certificate of appropriateness just on the base of the building since 1981. In terms of the context for the project, we looked at other neo-federal buildings with storefront installations and other comparable stylistic examples. On the left is 821 Madison. This is the building immediately next door to us. You can see it's a sister building of sorts. It predates the 1926 alteration at 823, but brick all the way down to the sidewalk level, and then these recessed black paneled openings within the storefront bays. On the right, 748 Madison, which has had also its own history of change through the addition of a few floors. But the original building, the historic building here, was the 2 brick piers flanking that grouped storefront. And again, the Flemish bond brick coming all the way down to the sidewalk level. The commission has approved a few examples of brick bases along Madison Avenue. There's some variation. None of them have the stylistic connection to the original condition that ours does. But here are just a few examples where brick has been installed with at the base of historic buildings and in new construction at the center view at 702. But again, that double height expression, 2 stories with the either the fully expressed spandrel dividing up the window or a reference to those spandrels that exist. It's sort of that kit of parts of Madison Avenue that allows for the rhythm. Even though there's been so much change along Madison, there's this thread that keeps them together. In terms of the brand, they have currently 2 flagship stores, Carolina Herrera stores on Madison Avenue. On the left is the Carolina Herrera flagship at 954 Madison, and that is they fully occupy the historic building. You can see they have red awnings, which were sort of a signature of the brand, not just in New York City, but elsewhere globally. And every window has a projecting awning. The current flagship for CH Carolina Herrera, which is the ready-to-wear brand of the designer, on the right is at 802 Madison, and we see that here with the projecting red awnings. And so now with this new location and asserting themselves as the flagship store, having a different sort of fresher look at the brand and its identity. The design really picks up, and this is specific to the second floor installation of the architectural fins, but the design really picks up on two elements within the Madison Avenue streetscape that we thought were very significant. The presence of awnings, of course, at the second floor, and architectural ironwork that we see both in historic installations and in a couple of contemporary examples, where it acts as a screening element or something that conveys identity or interest in terms of the design. And the issue with the awning is that it's either fully extended or it's retracted. And so the concept here is to really have something that creates an ornamental screening element. So in elevation, here we see the existing condition on the top and the proposed condition on the bottom. Again, that gradient of bays between the narrowest bay being to the north and the widest bay being to the south, and then marking the existing residential entry. This will remain the residential entry for the building. CH is taking the lower 3 floors, the upper 3 floors remain residential. So this residential entry location remains the same. And then at the second floor, we're going to look at this in detail, but the spandrel extends from pier to pier. The second floor window is going to be canted back, and then it follows the angle of the architectural fin. Signage is attached at the fins, and so it's sort of this layering effect of the spandrel beyond the fin, which are 3 inches deep, and then the signage beyond that. There's also some signage on the pier, pin-mounted signage, and that will be will have a black finish. And the signage along the awnings is brass. Here in plan, you can see that configuration, the existing and proposed on the bottom. The entry is set back about 3 feet from the front of the piers, and the display windows are 1.5 feet. And here you can see how that system all works. So it's a unified architectural system. There's a black metal sleeve that extends around the recessed opening. The canted glass extends up behind the plane of the brick, and then the architectural metalwork will come down and return along the bottom of the spandrel itself. The spandrel is also canted to reflect that angle, and it's hinged, operable in order to allow for cleaning. On the left is a section through the display window, and on the right is a section cutting through the entry with the slightly deeper recess. Here are those details at a slightly larger scale. You can see the brick cladding above, retaining the existing limestone cornice, the new spandrel glazing and architectural fin sandwich, and then the entryway at the bottom. Here are the fins in detail. As I said, it's each fin is 1 inch wide. They extend back 3 inches in depth. And then there's 3 inches between them. So as you walk along Madison, it'll kind of give you a rhythmic cascade of shadow and light as the second floor light comes through the fins themselves. The second floor is a true second floor. It will be used as a retail floor, so there'll always be sort of activity and silhouette that you'll be seeing there. And then the existing or the proposed spandrel system here with the signage. We can take a look at the signage too in detail after this, but the signage in terms of its height is consistent with what we see on our adjacent building. Here are the details. So the initials are 1.4 feet in height. These are all brass finish attached at the fins themselves, and then 4 inches for the Carolina Herrera below the logo above. And then at the pier, it is roughly 11 by 10, and this is black finished aluminum, and that's pin mounted to the pier itself. Here's just a sense of the overall palettes, the brass and black finish at the storefront, limestone, the existing limestone and both the new limestone base that is, we have a subtle grade change across the facade. So there's a step at the residential entry, and then to balance out the grade change under the sill, there is a limestone sill at the two display windows. And then here we found a very good brick match. We think it's very, very close. It'll of course be given a little bit of relief because we have the break with the limestone cornice, and that would be again laid up in Flemish bond as the existing is. And with that, that's the proposal. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. All right, do we have questions on this one? We're going to move to public testimony, and we may come back with questions after that. Jeremy Woodoff.
Jeremy Woodoff, speaking for the Victorian Society in New York. The existing two-story limestone retail base was apparently approved by this commission in the 1980s. Though altered in some unfortunate ways since then, it is still a far more appropriate design than what is being proposed today. In form, material, and details, it conforms to the neo-colonial 1926 redesign of these buildings. The applicant has provided a good set of historic images which show that the symmetrical facade at 823 survived until 2007. We find inexplicable and destructive the building's mutation from what was a symmetrical 1926 neo-colonial facade to the one proposed, where the lower two floors have no relationship to the upper floors. The applicant has provided two photos of other red brick neo-colonial buildings which have two-story storefronts facing Madison Avenue. 748 Madison is on board 5, 702 is on board 6. We urge the applicant to study these very successful projects and come back with a design that respects the symmetrical neo-colonial 1926 facade and its detailing. Second, we found the applicant's proposal to install tilted black anodized aluminum grills over the display windows on the second floor to be equally inexplicable. We must note that the first page of the master plan for storefronts on Madison Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District states that, quote, most of the shops have a transparency derived from their large areas of glass, which contrasts with the rich masonry facades of the row houses and apartment buildings which rise above them. When we studied the detailed drawings for the grills, we estimated that the vertical bars would block 25 to 30% of each window. The rendering on board 16 shows that from an angle, they will cut off views of the interior. They will eliminate the transparency this street is known for. We urge that the window grills be denied. If the applicants want sun protection, we suggest they review the LPC awning groups. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll note there is no one else in the room to speak, so I will turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a couple of remote participants with their hands raised. The first we'll be hearing from is Zainab Turan from the Friends of the Upper East Side. Zainab Turan, you've been promoted to panelist. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Zainab Turan speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. Our Preservation Committee can approve the facade alteration and storefront infill, which involves removing a column and bulkheads and adding 2 steel columns. We commend the inclusion of the elevation rendering for the entire block as part of the application, which effectively illustrates the pattern language of a vibrant and engaging Upper East Side block. The historical images of facade alterations provide a comprehensive record of how this building has evolved organically over time, including the removal of brick base in 1985 to accommodate another fashion house at the time, Valentino, in 1985. Our Preservation Committee finds the current proposal appropriate, as the alteration does not necessitate the removal of any historic materials. and the proposed facade aligns with contemporary design aesthetics. We also appreciate that the base will be recladded with red brick in Flemish bond, consistent with the building's neo-federal character and harmonizing with the adjacent building. The committee, on the other hand, remains uncertain about the slanted black aluminum architectural fins as a replacement for traditional awnings. Awnings are functional facade elements that provide weather protection, but the current design of fins with gaps between them does not seem to serve this purpose. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I've promoted you to panelist. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this proposal inappropriate. The existing symmetry of the current storefront relates cohesively to the upper floors. The proposed composition lacks symmetry and does not relate sufficiently to the floors above. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. Would you like to respond to the comments?
So I think I discussed much of this in the presentation, but the overall composition is meant to be dynamic, and the variation in the bays has logic to itself and is engaged. The overall architectural expression within each of the bays is a unified system. The historically, the piers were brick and they ran all the way down to the sidewalk. That was the historic condition. And the existing condition, and this is true of everything on Madison Avenue, is that there's, historically and in current practice, there's very little connection between storefront configuration and infill and what's happening on the upper parts of the building. I mean, that is part of what makes Madison Avenue such a vibrant and energetic and evolving retail corridor. It is so much so that is why the commission codified the master plan to be able to guide changes where so little historic fabric remains, because it is a landmark of retail expression. And I think that the goal here is to have a very quiet facade and allow the infill to be that sort of active measure within this quiet facade, which is very much inherent in the neo-federal style. In terms of the architectural fins, they are allusions to historic awnings and existing awnings, but they're not meant for weather protection. They're an architectural element, again, to give the store its identity and as part of its architectural expression. And the fins do allow for transparency, and it's going to create that sort of rhythmic changing view as you're walking up and down Madison Avenue. The existing use of awnings in the district is really one of identity. While they do provide weather protection and shade when they're deployed, they fully obscure the second floor, so there's no transparency of what's happening beyond. And in most cases, they're fully deployed all the time. And so we're on a low floor, we're facing west, there's not a lot of sun, and this is really meant to give a subtle screening and not necessarily obscure the entire installation in an architectural way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions, commissioners? Okay, so let's move to our discussion then. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed, and we're going to begin our discussion. And just to provide a little bit of context, we've heard about the Madison Avenue Master Plan, and what that is a set of rules that were that really were part of the designation of the historic district and then later codified into the master plan to allow for staff level approvals of storefronts along Madison Avenue. And the Madison Avenue master plan really does recognize and did recognize the frequent change of storefronts on Madison Avenue, the quality of those changes, noting that there were some inventive and innovative designs, and that there was little historic storefront infill left on Madison Avenue. And so the Madison Avenue master plan set forth a set of guidelines that would preserve the sort of character defining features of the storefront level at on Madison Avenue, which is really the two-story expression. As we know, many of the earlier 19th century row houses were altered in the early 20th century with the two-story storefront extension at the front. And many of the larger apartment buildings and apartment hotels were built with one or two-story storefronts. But where they were two stories, there was a strong expression of that on along Madison Avenue. So that was sort of a primary feature of the master plan, was that two-story expression, the repetitive module, and transparency and sort of maintaining the street wall. But through that master plan at staff level, the staff has approved a variety of storefronts in different materials and configurations because the master plan allows for a lot of flexibility in every aspect except sort of maintaining the two-story expression, transparency, and street wall. And so this application is before us because the master plan really is for changing out infill within storefront openings. And because this is changing the openings, we're reviewing this. But we should have that context and what was important in that master plan in our mind as we think about this. The applicant has shown that this building has received a number of commission approvals in the past and has been altered significantly over time. And you all can think about that as you comment as well. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start
Thank
this
you.
one?
So I have one thing I'm definitive of and two other things that I want to hear other commissioners' thoughts on. So I don't think the opening spacing should be changed. The current symmetrical spacing seems reasonable and I think is fine. I tend to think, so that's the thing I feel pretty strongly about. I tend to think that the limestone two-story base is fine. If you look at the street frontage, most of the other commercial establishments on the street have a two-story base, whether one is black, probably stone, the others could be limestone or stucco. And so taking the brick back doesn't really make sense to me, but if the other commissioners feel differently, I can live with that. The third thing, and there's sort of a few parts of this, from what I understand of the metal slats, I will need to be in front of, probably across the street, to see into the storefront, because with those slats, when I'm at an angle, I'm going to see a solid space. And I don't think that's particularly good. I think it's fine for the signage. If you only want people to read the sign when they're right in front of the store, that's fine. But for the to show windows, which you want to have perceived as commercial space, I think it would be better. And if you wanted to have red awnings like you have at the other stores at the top of the second floor, I think that would be fine. And that would not block looking into that storefront if the awnings were up in the top third of the space. The pin sign is fine. And so I think the infill at that spandrel, I'm quite flexible on. I'm just making sure. I think that's it in terms of my comments. So I really think we shouldn't change the basic openings, and the other two, I'm curious to see what my the fellow commissioners say.
Commissioner Chen?
I'm in agreement about the symmetry, but I also want to hear what the rest of the commissioner think about.
Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I really couldn't approve this as presented because I feel that, one, it's lost all sense of symmetry. And while it's true that there is no historic fabric here, historically, this has always had this lower storefront has always had a strong sense of symmetry. And the problem with taking away that symmetry is that the base now is really divorced from the top. And while some of the applicants stated that in general, there's, storefronts that don't relate to the rest of the building. First of all, we generally try to see them relate to that's one of our goals, I think, in reviewing projects, that there is a relationship. They don't have to echo it or be the same, and they can change radically. But there should be a sense of relationship. And the examples that they showed do have that relationship. It's not, they're not, comparable to the actual one that we're looking at. I think that part of the problem with that is the double height space. I mean, first it's the symmetry. And symmetry doesn't have to be, I mean, it was always a little off center in this building. It's a little odd, but it's got that sense that there is symmetry, even though it's a little eccentric. So there's a lot of room to play with, as has been shown by the various developments. But I also think that it is, even though there's been all these changes, there is still a strong sense this is a two-story space. And most of the Madison Avenue master plan looks to see a strong horizontal expression that shows that those spaces are divided into two stories. And that doesn't exist for me here. It's also gone. So those main factors, I just feel like it feels divorced from the base. It feels to me like it no longer works with the base. And I'd like to see it relate both in symmetry and with some horizontal expression that will stop it from just being sort of floating on those giant piers. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think the spandrel sort of is what we've approved in many double height storefronts, but I think the fin structure kind of obscures the spandrel,
Yes.
is what you're thinking.
And I think intentionally so. And,
Okay.
That's what's expressed. The design of the storefront has a strong logic, but it's an interior logic. It's not a logic that is relational. It's got its own, I'm a design and here I'm sitting, but the design to me is separated from the rest of the building. And that's part of the issue, the upper story not using the traditional awnings, and that's okay. But in this case, the way it's working is really, not relating it to me back to the building.
Yeah, and I think it is true that where the buildings had the two-story storefront extension, those storefronts rarely had any relationship to the upper floors.
Yes.
But I think because this is coplanar, you're wanting to see some sort of relationship to the symmetry or rhythm. Okay, Commissioner Chu.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Chapin's issue is mine too, and I think the rest of us, it's a compositional question, and it's not just the elevation, but it's the materiality. I agree with Mark in the existing condition where the base is limestone, there's a distinction of the storefront from the building because the material's different. Therefore, I can accept a difference. When you chose to not only use brick, but match the brick above, I felt like you contradicted yourself, and now it got mixed up for me. If you kept it different, I would have accepted a different logic, but you decided to go the route of being in keeping with the upper portion, and now I feel like it's crashing. So I would say you either keep the limestone and have that type of facade where the storefront is distinguished from the upper portion, in which case I could even look at a different elevation, but you materially change the bottom two floors. However, if you want to keep the brick, number one, matching the brick is never going to match. And so I find that it could be very odd. That's close, but not the same. And if you did feel that you could match and wanted to pursue that, then I would ask for more relationship with the facade above, because then I'm immediately looking up and seeing how it's related. I see these repetitive, beautiful little units up on the roof, all symmetrical, coming down, and I feel like the building as a whole, all we can look at is the context here, because as you properly stated, there's no historic fabric in what you're doing. So all we can look at is the context. And in this case, it doesn't feel contextual enough.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master.
So I think that some of the comments that were raised by the commissioners is very interesting, because I had thought of the retail element, the 2 floors of the retail element, as a separate entity. Because when I look at the streetscape, I see so much happening on the first 2 retail levels that's different from what happens above. But you know what, Stephen made a really good point that when you make it a brick pier, you almost tie the retail element to what's happening above, and then the asymmetry becomes more pronounced because you're almost making it a single element, returning it back to being a single element. So I agree, you can either go limestone or you're going to have to, do something to make it seem more symmetrical. I was also going to talk about the louvered element on the second floor window. I like when retailers try and do something different and try and establish their brand, and try to add a little bit more, I guess, depth and texture. And, what we, I guess, are more interested in is that there's an element of transparency. So when you tell me that the louvered element has 75% transparency, I don't think that's really conveyed in the renderings, but I will believe you. And so because of that, I would be supportive of the louvered element. And then in terms of the signage that you're proposing, I think it's very modest and understated, and I am supportive of that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
So this is an interesting one for me because the asymmetrical, a base, a middle, and a top. And the base, they want to make it asymmetrical. So the way they approached it was to say the 3 windows are all different sizes. One is large, medium, and small. They're 3 different proportions. And the pillars, the pillars are also different proportions. So there's this language that they're trying to develop on this base level. And having the language be the same material, the pillars be the same material, kind of makes it a very interesting composition. I find the difficulty with it is that the piers at either end are the same, and the 3 inner piers are different proportions. The glass is different proportions, and the way they're placed, the harmony between them is kind of odd. But they set up a tension between kind of a base language and a symmetrical language of the rest of the building, which is fine. And I think the way the technology, the way they try to deal with the awning, I mean, it's just an incredible effort to come up with something interesting and different. And I agree that when you see it from the side, but it's an intriguing idea. I hope they can work it out better.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. So for me, Stephen said what I was thinking almost exactly, that the choice of the brick took it out of the language of the autonomous storefront. Had it been in chrome or black granite or something that we do see on Madison Avenue, I think that it would have allowed for its own game to be played independently of the building above. But once you do the brick, you're making a statement. The thing that's fascinating about this building to me is that the more I look at it, it's like it's not symmetrical. It's oddly off. Look at the roof and how the demising wall between the 2 old townhouses is asymmetrical. Look at the space between the outer windows and the inner set. It's not the same. And that kind of casual semi-symmetry was, if you look at the historic pictures, how this building was handled when it was a 1-story storefront, when it was a 2-story storefront. everyone was playing around with kind of holding the center and keeping a kind of quasi-symmetrical arrangement, which Diana alluded to as well, while letting it be a little loose. The problem with this one is that it's not really playing that game anymore, and it's trying, like the applicant said, to do an autonomous, dynamic, quote unquote, arrangement. I don't think you're going to get it. I mean, the spacing is not dramatic enough. The breadth of the facade is not wide enough for you to get the game that they're trying to play. I think it'll just read as, oh, they put the columns in weird places and they were stuck with it. So I think that a design that I think that the brick is a good move. I personally think that the match that she showed looked pretty good. And I think if you look at the history of the applications that the commission has approved recently on Madison Avenue, the trend has gone towards an emphasis on connection between the base and the upper buildings, especially when they are coplanar. So I think that the brick is appropriate, and I think the retention of the limestone band is appropriate. I think that the openings have to be studied. I think that the louver, the problem with the blades is not that they function as kind of analogs to canvas. They actually have their own meaning with them. They come with their own baggage. They're not art pieces. I think that 99% out of the viewers would really read them as air conditioning elements. I think that they feel like the kind of things we see often as grills, especially when viewed obliquely. So I think that the idea is a really interesting one, and I think it can be modified through spacing. Maybe the blades themselves are skinnier. Maybe they're floating off the glass more. I think the applicant has to really look at that and study it in 3 dimensions and make sure that it has the diaphanous qualities that they want it to have. I think right now it doesn't have that. I think the signage is fine. And that's it.
Okay. Great. These were a great set of, oh, sorry. Yes.
One quick thing, I think they should study the blades at different angles, not straight ahead, sort of what Michael was saying, but down the block and up the block, across the street to see what it looks like at different locations.
Skinnier, space wider, steel instead of aluminum. They push the glass back. I think you can mess around with it, and you could get that effect that it wouldn't look like AC
louvers.
I would support that too, just because that'll look like our response to the design proposal. I think with exploration and detail and finishes, the top doesn't have to be the same face as the returns, and that can help highlight the depth and the light inside. So there could be a lot more, but we don't have the details to really understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is great. I want to thank you all for your really thoughtful comments. And I think we've given the applicants something to really think about and thinking about putting together some revisions and coming back to us. And I do think that there is something interesting about the louvers and, and I think about the sort of the idea behind the Madison Avenue master plan was always to allow the flexibility at the ground floor, recognizing that historically storefronts change not only frequently, but also in very interesting and inventive styles. And I think that ultimately the fins or the louvers could fall in line with that history, but they just need work on the detail and some exploration on the details, the spacing, the depth, and how it relates to the glass, and then be able to show that to us. And I think that, there's been a lot of discussion about the alignments, the choice of brick, and then how that leads to the composition, and think about the composition of those openings and how they relate to the rest of the building at that point. So we'll take no action, and we'll have you back as soon as we're ready. And that concludes our hearing for today. We will have a hearing next Tuesday, December 3rd. So we'll see everybody then. Thank you.